leave a like and subscribe.
When it finally arrived, the twins' acquittal from the McCowan case was not entirely unexpected, and they made the most of it. Someone had tipped off the press, and as the twins came down the steps of the Old Bailey, the family was out in force to greet them, including Violet and Auntie May and their old grandfather, Cannonball Lee, who was soon boring the reporters with tales of how he had taught the twins to box. But the star of the occasion was Reggie's new fiancée, Frances Shay. While he'd been in prison, Reggie had proposed and Frances had finally accepted. Now she was there to greet him. The April sun was shining, and for this one brief moment in their lives, the pair of them looked truly happy. Unlike Ronnie, Reggie had kept his looks, and there was something childlike about Frances with her shy girl's smile and auburn hair. She was not quite the girl next door. But she lived with her parents in Ormsby Street, which from Valence Road is just around the corner. Reggie had known her since she was a child, and had written to her every day while he'd been on remand. Whatever else it was, his love for her was deeply sentimental. She was his little goddess, his treasured Frankie, and he had courted her and written poems for her and showered her with gifts. Now, having proved his innocence in court, he was free to marry her. Given the circumstances, the engagement was a natural for the reporters, and the press photographers made the most of it. At that moment, even the most cynical of them might just have thought that the fates could still be cheated, and that the twisted story of the twins would have its happy ending. But by now there was little chance of that. As always with the Krays, the subplot was somewhat different from the story in the press. The Shays were Irish. The Krays had known them for years, and Frank Shay Sr. had worked at the Regency Club as a croupier. The family were all good-looking, and at one stage Ron had fancied Frances's brother Frank Shay Jr. and had tried, unsuccessfully, to get close to him. Coincidentally, it was around this time that Reg first noticed how pretty Frank Shay's little sister Frances had become. Although by then Ron was openly acknowledging that he was gay, Reg never really did, despite the fact that, as his brother's twin, they shared an identical genetic makeup, and their inherited sexual orientation was of course identical. In their teens, they had gone for much the same young boys and had had similar affairs. But then had come the period when, with Ron first in prison and then in the mental hospital, Reg had started to enjoy the company of women. He might, or he might not, have slept with them, but as far as Frances was concerned it didn't matter. Frances was very much her own person and had no intention of losing her virginity before there was a wedding ring on her finger. Even as early as August 1960, when Reg was briefly back in prison, he and Frances seemed to have taken it for granted that one day they would marry. But as she made very clear to Reg in one of her letters, she was an old-fashioned girl, and had no intention of being hurried. "I've made up my mind when I want to get married, not next year but the July afterwards. That will give us enough time to get a house built and get the wedding organized properly. We don't want to rush anything, because it's got to last a lifetime." This was typical of Frances, and from prison Reggie had gone along with her, although he used to fantasize about her and what they'd do together after his release. In the letters I have seen, the only hint he gives of anything unusual in his attitude to sex is a casual reference to bondage. "I have been thinking of a new way of tying you, ha ha, and then tormenting you. Is there anything you are particularly looking forward to?" he asks. That year, after Reg's release, the two of them had gone to Spain, but Frances hated the sight of blood and didn't care for bullfights, which had always fascinated him. Another year Reg took her to Milan, where they spent an evening at La Scala holding hands throughout the most romantic of Puccini's operas, Madame Butterfly. One odd feature of these holidays together was that, as Frances made a point of telling her father afterwards, Reg always insisted that they slept in separate rooms. I respected Reg for that, and saw him as a good clean-living fellow who looked after my daughter, Frank Shea Sr. remarked. More worldly-wise, his wife Elsie, who had been told by Frank Shea Jr. of Ron's behavior, had formed her own suspicions about Reg from the start. For the moment, however, in the excitement of the twins' acquittal, all this seemed unimportant and the Krays had much to celebrate. Back in Bethnal Green they were being hailed as local heroes for their victory over the police. The twins had bought the Hideaway Club from Hugh McCowan at a knockdown price, and Boothby had written to congratulate them as only he could. In a way I feel that we have both been vindicated, he wrote, although it's hard to see how this could have applied to him. This was, in fact, the last that the twins would ever hear from him, for his life too was changing. He might even have learned his lesson, for soon he would be marrying Wanda Sana, the convent-educated daughter of a Sardinian import-export dealer. According to Boothby's biographer, his bride, who was 33 years his junior, realized that there could be no question of children, and they are said to have stayed happily together until his death in 1986. As for Reggie's marriage, even Ron appeared to have accepted the idea of it by now. Only a few months earlier, when Reg had brought Frances to Esmeralda's barn, Ron had been so abusive that a fight had broken out and the twins had needed to be dragged apart or they might have killed each other. But that was all behind them now, and Ron was cheerfulness itself. Apparently delighted with the idea of his brother's marriage, he behaved to Frances like some old gay uncle. "So you're joining the family, are you, Frances dear? Hope you'll enjoy it," he would say whenever he saw her now. In spite of this, Frances told Reg that she found Ron creepy, but he told her not to be so silly. Ron has his little ways, but once you get to know him you'll see he has a heart of gold. The one member of the family who couldn't hide her feelings was the twins' mother Violet. Even several years later, after Frances had died, she confided to me that Frances was never good enough for my Reggie. When he brought her round to see me, she'd just sit there, polishing her nails, and you know what? She couldn't even make us all a cup of tea. However, with the rest of the family, especially Grandpa Lee and Auntie May, assuring her how much they loved her, Frances was not particularly concerned about the feelings of her future mother-in-law. What did worry her was the sheer determination of both the twins to make the wedding such a grand occasion. She knew that her Reggie was famous, but until now she'd never realized just how famous, and when he promised her the East End's wedding of the year she always said it wasn't what she wanted. "Reggie, I just want you," she'd say, but seeing how much he'd set his heart on a grand wedding she finally gave in, as she usually did with Reg, and went along with it. The one setback to the wedding that did occur was completely unexpected. Without discussing it with Frances beforehand, Reg had booked the big red brick church of St. James the Great for the wedding, and she knew how much he wanted Father Hetherington, the priest in charge, to marry them. The twins had known Father Hetherington since childhood, but when they asked him to officiate he refused. To make matters even worse, he told them that he hoped that they would not go through with it. Frances was surprised at how calmly Reg accepted this. All he said was, "Why, Father? Tell me why." "Because I don't think either of you has any notion of what marriage is about, nor can I see the faintest chance of you finding lasting happiness together. Worse still, If you insist on getting married, I fear you'll end up causing lasting harm to each other. Francis had never heard anyone talk like this to Reg before, and had it been anyone but Father Hetherington, there would certainly have been trouble. But Reg controlled himself. "What do you mean, Father? I'm sure you know what I mean, but I'll say no more." "Are you telling us we can't get married?" said Francis. "Not at all. I'm sure Father Foster will be happy to officiate if you insist, but I cannot." When they asked Father Foster, he did agree. Being younger and very friendly with the twins, he was possibly more broad-minded than Father Hetherington, and there was no question of him refusing. From what Reggie told me later, I'm sure that he saw marriage to Francis as his last chance to escape from the ties of twinship, from any slur that there might be upon his sexuality, and from being taken over totally by Ron. Certainly to start with, he thought that pretty Francis would provide a magical escape to a normal life, and he honestly believed that Father Hetherington was wrong. Like Francis, he might even have thought that love would conquer all. But, like Father Hetherington, Ron knew quite well that it wouldn't, and because he knew Reg so well, he simply smiled the contented smile of somebody prepared to wait. I'm sure he knew exactly what would happen and was determined that it would. Nothing could ever come between him and Reg, especially not a silly girl like Francis Shea. Just give Reg time, he'd learn. In the meantime, in the midst of the excitement following their acquittal, something that would be of considerable significance to the future of the twins now made its first appearance. Through the publicity created by the wedding, change was in the air. During the aftermath of the Boothby scandal, followed so swiftly by the twins' acquittal at the Old Bailey, the news media had found itself in something of a quandary. It was widely known and accepted that the Krays were among the most powerful and dangerous criminals in London. But because of the establishment cover-up, and because Lord Goodman, as he now was, had gagged the press so thoroughly, no one in the media dared say so. It was certainly not possible to describe how the twins had used Boothby's money to fix the McCowan trial, let alone to hint at the protection rackets, the long-firm frauds, the violence, and the twins' connections with the mafia. So when, after the acquittal, two smart young journalists, Louis Chester and Cal McChrystal, interviewed the twins for an article in the Sunday Times, they had a problem. Because of the newspaper's fear of libel, they could not refer to the twins as criminals, still less could they even mention what they did. Instead, with considerable ingenuity, the two journalists wrote a full-page human interest piece about the twins, avoiding any reference to crime. Instead, they always referred to Ron and Reg as the two famous sporting twins who were part of the culture of the old East End. There was no explanation of what the twins' favorite sport might be, but from now on, East End sporting twins became the phrase the press invariably adopted when describing them. Equally important, Chester and McChrystal were the first writers to use words like myth and legend when describing why the Kray twins were suddenly so popular. This popularity spread to other writers on the Sunday Times, and a few days later Francis Wyndham, novelist and feature writer in the paper's Colour magazine, wrote to the twins asking for an interview. Never once to miss a chance for self-promotion, the twins turned up next day at the Sunday Times offices to meet him. It was then that their adventures in the world of upmarket publicity really started. From the beginning, Wyndham and the twins got on famously together. They invited him to Valence Road to meet members of the family, who reminded Wyndham of characters out of Charles Dickens. There was some truth in this, and while he was preparing his article for the magazine, David Bailey, who had worked for the paper in the past, was commissioned to take the accompanying photographs. As an East Ender, born and bred in Leytonstone, Bailey knew about the Krays and got on well with them, so much so that he arranged the photo shoot in the West End studios of Vogue fashion magazine, where he often worked. As well as using the studio for his fashion photographs, he sometimes shot his celebrity portraits there as well, so at the time it seemed no big deal to him to be taking the Kray twins there. But something remarkable did happen that day in the studios of Vogue magazine when Bailey used his camera to record the moment when the swinging 60s came face to face with the two most dangerous criminals in London. The result was one of the most memorable photographs of Bailey's whole career. His portrait finally became the twins' monument, and 60 years on there is still something terribly disquieting in that tortured image of the twins. But Bailey's role in the story of the Krays was not over. The Sunday Times never used Wyndham's article, and rather than waste the double portrait, Bailey decided to include it in his box of pin-ups, an impressively boxed and packaged limited edition of his prestigious portraits of key celebrities of the 1960s. These included pop stars like the Beatles and Mick Jagger, actors like Peter Sellers and Michael Caine, and models and starlets like Jean Shrimpton and Marianne Faithfull. To include that image of the twins among such figures enrolled them in the ranks of accredited 60s celebrities. For the benefit of anyone who was not too sure about the Kray twins' claim to fame, Francis Wyndham wrote a fulsome piece about them, which was printed on the back of their portrait. The so-called celebrity culture really started in the 60s. It was very much the product of what Marshall McLuhan called the electronic media, and unlike fame, which rested essentially on achievement, celebrity was primarily concerned with image, on being, as Henry James first put it, famous for being famous. Hence the importance of so many young photographers in the culture of the 60s. Hence also the importance of the Bailey portrait at this point in the twins' rise to fame. It didn't matter that, with the hush-up of the Boothby scandal, nothing of real importance about them could be stated in the press. To go with Bailey's virtuoso portrait of the twins, all that was needed was Francis Wyndham's explanation not of what they did but of why they were celebrities. Starting from the premise that the East End was like the American Wild West, Wyndham went on to describe the twins as Cockney versions of famous outlaws such as Jesse James, and there was a lot of talk of myths and legends and folk heroes. To be with the twins is to enter the atmosphere, laconic, lavish, dangerous, of an early Bogart movie. All this was fairly harmless, and the twins of course loved it. For them it was invaluable publicity, and it set a very large ball rolling. It was this that worried another photographer who also worked for the Sunday Times and who wielded considerably more influence than David Bailey. This was the Queen's new brother-in-law, Lord Snowdon. As a young photographer, he had lived in the East End, where he'd learnt enough about the twins to strongly disapprove of turning them into 60s heroes. It was largely thanks to Snowdon's influence that David Bailey's box of pin-ups never found a US publisher. By now it was time for Reggie's wedding. As one might have guessed, Reg had got his way, and this really did turn out to be the East End's wedding of the year. And suddenly the twins were on display, surrounded by a fascinating mix of criminals and celebrities. They were observing the first law of celebrity, which states that a celebrity is celebrated for being a celebrity, and they can usually be spotted in the presence of other celebrities, in this case Diana Dawes, Joan Littlewood, and Tom Dryburgh, who were all at the wedding. Another telltale sign of true celebrity is the presence of photographers, in this case the Crown Prince of 60s snappers in person who, dressed in a blue velvet suit, drove up in a matching blue Rolls-Royce. David Bailey had recently left his best-known model and girlfriend, Twiggy, and confirmed his own position as a celebrity by marrying a film star, the French actress Catherine Deneuve. This was the only time since his rise to fame that Bailey condescended to become a wedding photographer, together with Francis Wyndham as his assistant. But as far as the wedding was concerned, only one person and one alone was in command. As the organ started up the marriage hymn, "O perfect love, all love excelling," the response from the congregation was far from perfect. It was the sort of awkward situation when nobody felt like joining in. And suddenly Ron showed what he really felt about the marriage as he started marching angrily up and down the aisle. "Sing, fuck you, sing," he shouted, and as usual when the colonel gave the orders everyone obeyed. The reception that followed was at the now notorious Glenray Hotel in Seven Sisters Road, where not long before the twins and Mad Teddy Smith had been arrested. But now it was crammed with starlets, gangsters, members of the two families, and Tom Dryburgh. As for pretty nervous Frances, she was caught in a situation that she would never understand, and a nightmare that she was never going to escape. Because of that unforgiving bond that ruled the twins, the conflict between them would end up destroying her. The marriage was a nightmare almost from the start, and even the honeymoon was doomed. From his school days, Reg remembered pictures of the Acropolis overlooking Athens as a wishing to impress his bride. He picked on Athens for their 6-day honeymoon. What he didn't know was that the Athens of the 1960s had barely recovered from Greece's civil war, and it was not the place to take a girl like Frances. There were no smart shops, no sexy nightclubs, nowhere interesting to go, and naturally, the couple didn't speak a word of Greek. Since Frances found it hard to hide her disappointment, so did Reg, and instead of a romantic beginning to their marriage every evening, Reg left her in their hotel bedroom while he went out on the town and got completely drunk. When they returned to London, Reg continued to get everything wrong. Wanting to spoil Frances with a smart West End existence, he rented an apartment in a luxury block near Marble Arch, but almost from the start Frances hated it. Violet had been right about one thing: her new daughter-in-law couldn't cook. She also missed her friends. The West End was unfamiliar, and she felt lonely and homesick for Bethnal Green. Although he kept telling her he loved her, Reg was miserable and lonely too, and was soon drinking more than ever to disguise his inadequacy. He was 10 years older than his bride, a homosexual gangster who preferred neat gin to making love to her, and despite all the fuss about the wedding of the year, the marriage died before it even started. Somehow they endured 4 wretched weeks together, staring at the traffic around Marble Arch before they realized that their only hope lay in getting back to the East End. Even now this just might have worked had Reg chosen any other place to live than in the empty flat directly under Ron's at Cedra Court. I always wondered why he did this, for Reg wasn't totally naive and must have had some idea of what would happen. One can only suppose that, as usual, he was being torn between his longing to escape from Ron and his awareness that he couldn't live without him. Also, Ron's power as the dominating twin was getting stronger by the day, and since the unhappiness and strain of his marriage were simultaneously weakening Reg, there was little he could do against him. Every evening Reg and Frances had the same routine. Just before 7, Reg would pour himself his first neat glass of Gordon's gin, followed by another, after which he'd disappear upstairs, leaving Francis to watch television and go to bed alone. Instead of sleeping, she was often kept awake by the sound of music and male laughter from the flat upstairs. When Reg finally did return, sometimes as late as 3 or 4 in the morning, he was often paralytic and could even be sadistic. He would shout obscenities at her, and she told a friend that on one occasion he was actually foaming at the mouth. She insisted that he never hit her, but he certainly threatened her with violence. He also warned her that he would hurt members of her family. Knowing how much she feared the sight of blood, he cut his hand and let the blood drip over her. Also knowing how she dreaded guns, he threatened her with one. Sometimes he sobbed and blamed her for the fact that their marriage was unhappy. Once she awoke in the dark in the middle of the night and knew that beside her was her husband and another man. By now Reg was reverting to a Jekyll and Hyde existence and effectively becoming two quite separate people. In the morning when he woke, the husband of the midnight hours had gone, and in his place there was the gentle Reg, who was once more kind and thoughtful, and for whom nothing was too much trouble. He never seemed to have a hangover, and in the morning he was always sober. As for Ron, although Francis sometimes recognized his voice shouting from above, she rarely saw him now except when he passed her on the stairs. Every time this happened, his greeting was the same: "Cheer up, Francis, love. You're looking worried." In fact, she was terrified of Ron by now and understood the power he had over her husband. To one girlfriend she confided her belief that Ronnie had bewitched him. "Ron possesses him," she said. Francis endured 8 weeks of misery before returning to her parents. She told her mother that the marriage had become a nightmare. "What can I do? No one else will ever want me." I once asked a cousin of the Shays why Francis didn't leave Bethnal Green and start a new life somewhere else. "How could she?" he replied. "Bethnal Green was the only place she knew, and her family was all she had. Besides, Reg had warned her that if she ever ran away from him, he'd always follow her and find her." I'm sure that this was true, but I'm also sure that there was more to it than that, and that both she and Reg had now become dependent on each other. In years to come she would continue to obsess him from beyond the grave. Otherwise it's hard to understand what happened next. No sooner was Frances safely back in Ormsby Street with her family than Reg started coming round to see her, as he used to do when they were courting. And since her parents wouldn't have him in the house, he'd stand patiently outside on the pavement until Frances opened her bedroom window. Then they'd talk, often for an hour or so. Before long this was becoming something of a habit, and hardly an evening passed without it happening. But the marriage itself was clearly over, and with it vanished any hope Reg ever had of escaping from his fate. As for Frances, she was henceforth at the mercy of the twins.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.